So welcome back to part 2 of my draft breakdown. If you've not seen the first one, please go check that out. That is my draft steals, where I named 10 players that I think were stolen in this draft. Amazing value, regardless of teams that trade up to them or they just fell in their laps. But for this one is the other side of it. Players that I feel were taken too high, regardless if I think that they were just bad fits, not necessarily a big need for the team, whatever it may be. Not knocking them, saying these are horrible players. I'm not saying any of these guys are horrible. I just don't think it was a great spot for said team. Like I said, it depends on if it was a need or not. But jumping right in for my first one, it's going to be, and before I get into this, I'm going to be bouncing off random rounds. So I might go from first round to the fourth round back to the second round. So it's not going to be in the exact order. It's just in no particular ranking whatsoever. Just name them off the bat, just like the first video. But getting into it, the first one I have is Cam Smith. Now, this was the Dolphins' first pick in the draft. Of course, but they didn't have a first-round pick because of the Tyreek Hill trade. And this was exactly the second round, pick 51. I don't like this because of it wasn't a need. The obvious need was offensive line. And you look at what they already have at depth at Xavier Howard, just traded for Jalen Ramsey not too long ago. Still Byron Jones. I know he's very injury-riddled, but still on the team. I mean, it's to some extent I can see why. You look at his stats in 2023, played 11 games. He was targeted 38 times for only giving up 18 receptions for 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Passer rating was 71.3. Doesn't sound too bad, but when you compare him to the previous season, it is definitely a step down. So in 2021, he had if I said 2023, my bad, 2022 for his last one. 2021, this is the season before, 11 games, same. Targeted 32 times, only gave up 15 receptions for 184 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, or a passer rating of 36.5. So especially the passer rating is a huge jump up from 2021 to 2022. But you still see the potential. Even with that, he still seems like a great corner, no doubt. And for his snap alignment on the defense, 356 were at corner, 196 were at slot. And I feel like for now he's probably going to be playing in that slot position. Again, probably taking over for Byron Jones if he's injured. And I get, with contracts and age coming up for these players soon, they might move off of one of them or multiple of them, and Cam Smith can move up and be one of those guys. But I think for now, I don't think there's a huge need. I think the glaring one, especially for your quarterback, he almost retired because of injury, concussions. So the obvious one was offensive line. And players I had passing up one was John Michael Schmitz. He was the 57th pick in the second round, went to the Giants. The other one is Osiris Torrance, pick 58 to the Bills. I think that was a much glaring need and a much bigger spot to fill as opposed to cornerback, which you could probably get away with for another year or two before you really have to evaluate that position. I get he is a great talent at corner, but I just think the more glaring need is protecting your quarterback because you almost lost him this offseason. And who knows what if it goes through another process again, you might be out of a starting quarterback. You might have to scramble around and try and find one through trade or draft or whatsoever. I think it was more important to protect Tua in this instance. And again, I think it was not a huge need for Miami. So next one I have is Hendon Hooker. Pro Football Focus gave an amazing grade, 90.8. So I forgot to see Cam Smith had a 65.1, so not too crazy. But for Hendon Hooker, 90.8 was amazing. In 2022, in 11 games, he had 3,135 yards, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, passer rating of 123.9, a completion percentage of 69.6%. Amazing, and we saw that the huge, Tennessee was a huge shock this season. It looked like at one point they were going to make the playoffs. Unfortunately, they lost to South Carolina, which ultimately knocked them out. But they definitely had an amazing season, especially upsetting Alabama and helping them knock out Alabama in the playoffs. But again, for this one, I wonder the need. And there's going to be another Lions player later in this pick. But I question more so with Jared Goff. I think he played amazing this season. I think he has shown through his career he is capable of being a starter. I know you can go back and forth about was Sean McVay the main reason why Goff succeeded there, but you have to still give him credit. He did go to the Super Bowl. He did play amazing when he was there. His first season in Detroit wasn't too spectacular, but this past year he really took a step up. I think Detroit was one of the best offenses statistically in the NFL. It was just a defense that really let them down for a good portion of the season. But I thought Goff played amazing. I think he proved that he could be a future starter for the Lions. I just question Hendon Hooker, especially with his age of 25. I don't know how long you can sit him for. I feel like for Hooker, it's a year or two max, I think. Because I feel like you shouldn't wait because of his age. I mean, even in 2 years, he'll be 27, 28, depending on how it lines up with his when he was born. And I think it's a throwaway pick, in my opinion. I think there was other teams that probably could have used Hendon Hooker or been a much better situation for him as opposed to the Lions. For pass-ups, I did have Tank Dell, that went to the Texans at 3rd round, pick 69. I think offensive help would have been amazing. I know you still have Monte Brown, but for Williams, he is suspended for the first 6 games of the season because of gambling. And, of course, before that, he was out for almost the entire season because of his injury. But I thought adding talent to Jared Goff, the way the NFL is going, just stacking the offenses would have been a much better option. People are high on Nathaniel Dell, even though he is the smallest receiver in the draft. A lot of people like his playmaking ability, and I thought he could have really helped out at that spot. Another one is Byron Young from Alabama, 3rd round, pick 70 for the Raiders. And also another one I have for wide receiver is Jalen Hyatt, 3rd round, pick 73 to the Giants. Again, adding another weapon that I had for steals. In my first video for the Giants, I thought they could have an explosive wide receiver, pair along with Jason Williams when he comes back from suspension, alongside Amon St. Brown. I think they could have been an amazing group of wide receivers, if you want to say Hyatt or Tank Dell. I think that would have been a much better option as opposed to throwing a 3rd round pick away for a quarterback, because you're kind of telling me you don't believe in Goff. And I think I don't think that's really fair to say, because I think Goff played amazing last year. I think it's a throwaway pick. I get not knocking on Hendon Hooker saying he's a bad quarterback or he'll be bad, but I just think it's a bad spot for him. Maybe their plan is to eventually move off of Goff soon and Hendon Hooker be the starter. But at least right now, I think it's a much better option to stick with Goff and surround him with talent. So next one is Devin Achane. If I pronounce that right, I apologize if I got that wrong. Running back from Texas A&M. This was the 3rd round pick for the Miami Dolphins. Pro Football Focus had an 82.4. In 2022, he had 196 attempts for 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaged 5.6 yards per carry. He also added 36 receptions for 196 yards. The biggest thing I can see why they added him is speed. And you look at the players they have on the offense, it is nothing but speed. You look at Waddle, Hill, Chosen, Anderson, who they just picked up, Raheem Mostert, and now with Achane, if I pronounce that right again, sorry. They're all speed. I think actually he was around 4.2, 4.3, I think in that range for him. So I get you want to add speed to that. And that whole offense is basically speed. It almost reminds you of like a basically building a team on Madden. But regardless, once again, I think this was similar to what I have for Cam Smith. I think offense would have been a much better option. Also defense as well. Especially, you already have Jeff Wilson Jr., Raheem Mostert. There's still talks of adding Dalvin Cook in this mix still. So again, if they're still going to keep that group together, Jeff Wilson, Mostert, Devin for the draft pick, and you add Dalvin Cook, it's a crowded backfield. I think it's a waste of a pick. Again, if you are trying to get Cook, I think it's a waste of a pick for this one. For pass ups, you could have got Jair Brown, safety from Penn State, 3rd round, pick 87 for the 49ers. Wanya Morris, tackle from Oklahoma, 3rd round, 92 or 92nd pick to the Chiefs. Another one for offense, too, if you want to go with that, is Darnell Washington, tight end, 3rd round, 93rd pick to the Steelers. Some people say he was the best steal, the biggest steal in the draft. I think tight end would have been I could definitely see if you want to go offense, at the very least, a tackle or tight end for Darnell Washington. I could definitely see him with his size, 6'7". That would have much better need since you lost Gasecki, or you let him go. I just think running back here was a throwaway. Same thing when I said the Cam Smith. I could understand more if I had to pick one or two, which one was better. I can understand Cam Smith for, maybe in a year or two you might have to get rid of one of those corners and have him step up. And the same thing can be said for Etchney, where they could get rid of Jeff Wilson Jr. and he can step up and be one of those guys. But again, I think a more glaring need was offensive line, I should say, or tight end. So next one we have is probably the biggest shock was Jake Moody, kicker that won the third round for the 49ers from Michigan. Very iffy on this one. You look at for extra points, he was 100% in his career. He went 60 for 60. Unbelievable. But his field goals outside of extra points is a little bit concerning, especially it seemed like for his full-time really kicking, it looked like for stats, when you look at his prior years, it didn't seem like he really kicked too much. So for his first year, it looked like fully, kicking a lot. He only completed 82.9% of his kicks, or 29 out of 35. Again, some people would say this isn't a bad pick because the 49ers are already stacked at a lot of places, so there's not a huge glaring need outside of kicker maybe. But still, I just think there's still a big waste in the third round. I think you'd still get a ton of value in the third round. I think taking a kicker at this spot is a little shocking. I think one instance you should look at is tackle, because of Trent Williams. You don't know how much longer he's going to play. This might be his final year in the NFL, at the very least, at least one more year. So I think you should have got a developmental person to take over from. Two I had was Drake Freeland, 4th round pick 106. Then went to the Colts, or the biggest, another one I had in my steals video, Dawan Jones, tackle from Ohio State that went to the Browns, 4th round, or pick 111. I think one of those two to help develop under Trent Williams, who potentially could be this final year, or at the very least have one more year after that. I think that should have been a much glaring need to get someone like that to replace Trent Williams, a much bigger need, even though it's not an instant impact player right away. It definitely, if you develop him right, you really believe in him, I think he could definitely be a long-term starter at the offensive line position. But I think that, especially those two I think that should have been a much bigger need as opposed to Jake Moody. And especially I question his kicking ability with his last year being 82.9. It's a little down there. So next one, going back to the first round, which I guess out of all of them, I'm not the worst one. I can understand it when you look at the stats a little bit more, but I think there was a little bit better options out there. I have Emmanuel Forbes in the first round to the Washington Commanders, pick 16, if I believe. I just check on my list here. He was pick 16. So you break it down in his career in the 3 years. He had 14 interceptions. 6 of them came last year. 3 of them were touchdowns. He was targeted 58 times. He only let 31 receptions for 284 yards. His passer rating was 44.7. So when you look at that, that's really good. And you say that's dominant. That's really good compared to, I guess, if you want to compare to Cam Smith. I know two totally different prospects. One the middle of the second round, one in the top 16th overall. So definitely not apples to apples, but definitely. We look at his stats from Emmanuel Forbes, definitely a lot, showed a lot of promise. Surprised a lot of people that he went this high. I know when it was live and it was first announced, people were a little bit shocked that he went this high. But I also look at for the pass-ups. You look at the next pick at 17, you had Christian Gonzalez on the board, and I believe throughout my whole mock draft process, I went back and forth between Witherspoon and Gonzalez as being the top corners in this year's draft. And the fact that Gonzalez was still on the board and you pass up over him to take Emmanuel Forbes, I think is a big knock. And for steals, I didn't have in my video, but many people have the Patriots as for Gonzalez as a huge steal at 17 that he fell all the way. Another one too I have is, if you look at offense, because you lost T.J. Hockenson, Dalton Kincaid, that went 25th overall to the Bills. I did not see him going this far. I think at last video I had him going to the Packers, the 13th overall pick. So the fact that he fell all the way at that point at 16, he was still on the board. I think I could understand that you would go in that position. You still have Logan Thomas, but many people will probably be in consensus saying that Dalton Kincaid is a much better option, younger, cheaper, and obviously for talent-wise, obviously more talented than Logan Thomas. Even though Logan Thomas is a decent tight end, I think they would have a much better need to, surround talent around Sam Howell, along with the receivers they already have and running backs they have. That might have been another option. Another one I had was maybe Joey Porter Jr. that won the second round, top pick or 32nd overall, and Deonte Banks that won 24th overall to the Giants. I think those are a little bit more interesting picks, though you could argue between probably Porter Jr. and Deonte Banks. You can go back and forth between them. But overall, I just very least Christian Gonzalez and Dalton Kincaid, I think, were massive passes that they passed up on at 16. So next one we have is Stetson Bennett, 4th round. You could look at this one, obviously, for the 4th round picks, the Rams had so many of them, had 11 in total, that you could take a chance on one, throwaway. I don't want to say throwaway a pick, but you could take a chance on one. It's not going to hurt you because you have so much more. You could look at this as a security insurance policy for Matthew Stafford. Last year, he was out for a good portion of the season with injuries. He also is getting up there in age. I think right now he's age 37. So I understand that, at least if you're looking at for this year, if he does get hurt, Stetson Bennett could come in and do well. He's 25. You can say anything with Henry Hooker. He's up there in age, 25 years old, a bit more mature, has played in college for quite a while. So I won't say not too much of a developmental part of it. But regardless, I question the pickup for this one. I mean, just quickly going off his stats, I apologize. He had Pro Football Focus had him rated really highly at 90.1. In 15 games, he had 4,132 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a 68.1 completion percentage, or 110.1 passer rating. Also, national champions that completely obliterated TCU in the championship. The other concern is his size, 5'11", 182. The same thing was the discussion for Bryce Young, who was a tad bit shorter, a little bit heavier at 5'10", 204, I think he runs. But for this one, I question the size, 5'11", 182, and people went back and forth between his character concerns, and many people thought that he was going to go undrafted because of that. I did not think he was going to go undrafted, but I did not think he was going to go in the 4th round. Thought it was higher than I think probably many people expected. People I had him pass up on was Nick Herbig, 4th round, 133, defensive end. I believe if I had the right defensive end outside linebacker for Wisconsin that went to the Steelers. I think that was an amazing pickup there. Jay Ward, that went safety out of LSU that went to pick 134 of the Vikings. I think they could have been much better. Either one of those picks. Definitely Nick Herbig at 132. I think it would have been much bigger need, especially at defense, since they really kind of tore that down, getting rid of some people, losing Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey, Floyd, many other people. I think there could have been a much glaring need at that spot. So the fact that they went with Stetson Bennett at that position surprised me. And then same way I view it as like Ken Hooker. Are they kind of alluding to if they like him a lot, if he really wows them, especially this year? Is there a chance that he could potentially take over soon because of, like I said, Matthew Stafford getting up there in age? Could they look at this as a possibility as a next franchise quarterback? I don't know. But I think regardless, I believe restacking the defense and trying to rebuild that, I think it was a much bigger need at the 4th round than taking Stetson Bennett. So next one I have is Sam LaPorta. Pro Football Focus rated him as a 80.1 for his grade. He only had 58 receptions for 648 yards, 1 touchdown. The biggest knock I have on this was the next pick after, pick 35, Michael Mayer, who was still available on the board, and the fact that they passed over LaPorta, they took LaPorta over Michael Mayer, really shocked me. And this one, I go back and forth between Kincaid and Mayer being the top tight end in this draft class. But I could also get why you look at Iowa, they've tight ends have really panned out as of recently, so you can understand that they would take a chance on that. They've seen the success. Obviously, with their last Iowa tight end, they had T.J. Hawkinson, so maybe they can replicate that. But again, for huge pass ups, for snap wise, let me go in that quickly. He had 157 snaps in line and 97 at the slot. That's where he lined up in the offense. But for pass-ups, obviously, I have Mike Mayer, who went with the next pick. Pro Football Focus had a 92.5 grade on him. And I also added in the first round, which they had a possibility of getting, was Dalton Kincaid. They got in 25th pick to the Bills. He was a 90.5 for his Pro Football Focus. Like I said, LaPorta had an 80.1 for his grade. A lot lower than Mayer and Kincaid. But at the very least, you had Mayer on the board, and I think that was a huge miss that they picked him. They passed up on Mayer. I think the Raiders will get an amazing tight end in him. So next we have Zach Charbonnet, second round pick for the Seahawks. Pro Football Focus graded him highly, 90.5. 2022, he had 194 attempts for 1,350 yards, 14 touchdowns. Also added 37 receptions for 320 yards. He averaged an impressive 7 yards per carry, size-wise 6 foot, 214. The biggest thing I have with this is kind of the glaring obvious one is you drafted Kenneth Walker last year in the second round, and he definitely, once Rashad Penny got hurt and he stepped in, he was amazing. He really showed you why at one point he was considered a Heisman favorite or Heisman winner when he played at Michigan State. Of course, just like any of the rookies, hit a wall at times. Definitely didn't play, amazing every single game, but was one of the best offensive players that they had late into the season. Another thing I question too is with Pete Carroll saying that they're going to be competing for the starting job. It looks like, or at least for obviously time on the offense, which I don't understand because I thought the obvious thing was Kenneth Walker being the number one back. I think he really proved that to you. He really showed that to you. So the fact that you took just in general, a running back in the second round, I think it was a huge mess. I know you want to do a rotational backs, but I think you could have got great value later in the draft as opposed to the second rounds. Pass-ups I have on, once again, for offense, I have Osiris Torrance. You could have bolstered that offensive line to help Kenneth Walker and Geno Smith got pick 59 to the Bills. Gervon Dexter, pick 53 to the Bears, which was a D tackle out of Florida. Again, many people say he was a high upside, just inconsistent at times. I thought you could have really bolstered that defensive line as well. And also Tully, I don't want to try and pronounce his name because I'm going to do horrible at it. Outside linebacker out of USC that went pick 54 to the Chargers. Again, I think at the very least, defense. I could definitely see another defensive pick here, or at the worst, a offensive lineman who again, Osiris Torrance was still available on the board. So then finally, I have the other Lions player that I teased in the beginning when I said Hendon Hooker. I have Jack Campbell. This is another pick, I should say, that I can understand the reasoning behind this, but I just think he was taken higher than expected. So Pro Football Focus had an amazing grade on him still, 90.1. He had, in 13 games this year, he had 125 total tackles, only 12 missed tackles. Linebacker went back and forth to who was the top one in this draft class, but it seemed like more and more it looked like maybe Jack Campbell was the top linebacker, though you can say Will McDonald, draft-wise, was the first one taken off the board, outside linebacker that went to the Jets, though people argue with that he was probably taken way too high and they should have went somewhere else with that. But for Campbell, again, not knocking this guy, saying he's a bad player, it's a horrible, that he won't pan out. I just think you pass up on. Once again, what I said for offense, what I said for Hendon Hooker, you had, at that point, at pick 18, you had every single wide receiver available to you. Though I'm not high on Quentin Johnson, you had him available. But for pass-ups, I had Jackson Smith and Jigba, who many people believe is the number one wide receiver in this draft class, that went to pick 20 to Seattle. Zay Flowers that went to pick 22 to the Ravens. Jordan Addison, which I believe is the best wide receiver in the draft class, went to the Vikings at 23. Dalton Kincaid, once again, what I said for LaPorta. When you passed over Mike Mayer in the second round, at this point in time, you had a chance to pick Kincaid at this spot. Even looking at corner, Deontay Banks was also another one who's still on the board. I think you really could have used the secondary help at the corner position. I know you got Brian Branch in the second round, which was an amazing pickup, which was in my first video as a steal. But I think also trying to replace Jeff Okudah would have been a big thing. And I think getting Deontay Banks, who was still available. I could also throw in there Joey Porter Jr., though you could argue that's a bit too high, but you're still available as well. Another one is Nolan Smith, who I did not expect falling to 30, which again was in my video as well for steals. Nolan Smith was still available, and I thought he could have went to the Lions. Very versatile, though the knock on him is his size. But I think there was, out of all of them, I think this was the most pass-ups, for options they had at 18. Again, you had all the receivers on the board still. Tight end, you had Dalton Kincaid. You had Deonte Banks, Nolan Smith still. I think it was a huge pass-up on, getting Jack Campbell. That you probably could have got a little bit later on. Not saying he was, I doubt he was going to be available next time you picked, because if you look in the second round, the next time they picked was, 34. So there's a really good chance you could have picked up Jack Campbell at 34, at the very least, if you wanted to go that route and taken one of the top guys with the 18th overall pick. Though you could argue they won defense, obviously, because they took Jamari Gibbs at 12, which was another player that everyone thought was way too high, at least in my opinion. I did not expect Jamari Gibbs to even be in the first round, regardless of the fact that he went top 15 is insane. But I think there was a lot of value they left on the board at pick 18, though I get you wanted to get your linebacker, but I think you could have got him at 34 and take one of these guys, especially Jackson Smith and Jigba. But if you're not looking at slot, Jordan Addison, Deonte Banks, Nolan Smith or Dalton Kincaid were much better options at 18. But that's going to wrap up my video for players that were taken too highly on. I want to say this is like draft busts, but just definitely reaches in my opinion. Again, not saying that all these. Once again, I want to keep clarifying this. I'm not saying these players are bad. I'm not saying they're gonna be horrible. They're not gonna pan out. I think they are great players. I think they're just taken too high, and I think the bigger problem is more so the teams not taking a more obvious need, a little bit of a reach, if you want to say. But again, that's my picks for the reaches for the draft class of 2023. But it's going to wrap up the second part of it. Again, go check out my first video for steals, and this one, please watch, obviously, the draft reaches. But without further ado, like on the first one, let me know your thoughts below on my list. If you don't like it, who would you add on the list that you would say was a massive reach in this year's draft? But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.